So anybody that saw my post yesterday, I want to address that very quickly. It's not really the whole thing, but Candace Owens, I dropped a post on Facebook that said something to the effect of, if you're okay with the smear campaign of Candace Owens, then you're more Democrat than black. That's just a saying I really like to use, because if you're a long time follower, you know that I've often and very make a very conscious push for our community to become political independence and not beholden to one party or the other. So really, the Candace Owens situation, to be honest, really just gave me an excuse to use my saying, and I wanted to push the envelope sincerely, sincerely from this standpoint, knowing that most of our community pretty much despises Candace Owens, because of the hard positions that she takes. In I guess in what is a matter of fact, she's running something called Blexit, where she's trying to push for blacks to exit the Democrat community and the Democrat Party. I'm sorry, and come over to the Republicans, and she goes super hard. So um, I saw the situation where they were turning her into, if you've seen her comments, or some people don't even know about it, her comments in which it seems like she was saying Hitler was okay if he had just remained a nationalism, because she was making comments in support of being a nationalist, because obviously she, in a sense, represents the right per se, if you want to use that. And so, anyway, um, I saw where, uh, in a sense, I thought it was a smear campaign, in the sense that once I saw her response to her original statement that wasn't real clear, to be fair, and then her response to it at the congressional hearing made it clear that she wasn't a supporter of Hitler, as people deemed from her statement. And so, um, I thought the media, or the people that were in a sense trying to smear her and say that she was a lover of Hitler, for example, they were saying it even though that's not what she said, especially upon the clarity in the initial statement. I could see how that kind of got out there, but then when she responded, and some people haven't seen the response. Anyway, this post is not completely about her. I wanted to really explain, what I was, in a sense, pushing the envelope. For those that don't know, I go by the name Black Socrates. Socrates was known as a gadfly, pushing the envelope on thought. And so, what I was hoping to do with that post was just push people past the idea of this person they despise, to be able to see that it's very possible that the campaign was basically spinning the narrative of what she said falsely. And that happens especially when it comes to politics on both sides of the issue. And so I was pushing people to be able to take this person that you just, a lot of people despise. I don't despise her, right or wrong. That's where I'm staying. I don't really throw people away regardless, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I don't despise her. But to take this person you despise, and can you see that the bigger issue is how there was a campaign falsely being pushed, and that in my opinion, if we're able to allow someone to falsely push a campaign on someone because we do not like them, then it really doesn't give you a leg to stand on when the same thing is done to you. So, in my opinion, I put the post up to challenge people to see past this person who you may despise, and see the strategy and the tactic that was being used, and to challenge people to be consistent on the tactic. Now, if you actually go to my Facebook page and see the back and forth, that was, put back and forth, then I definitely saw others' perspective on how they felt like it wasn't a smear campaign. But either way, the idea was to challenge people on the concept of taking a falsehood and pushing a false narrative, and that I do believe we should always be consistent, whether that's done to us or to someone we don't like. The tactic and the strategy must be called out if we want it to happen less to everybody, to all citizens. But it's very necessary, even for the protection of your own agenda or your own, um, demographic, or whatever the case may be. I think I still stand by. We should be consistent in calling out the action. You can't like it. You can't agree with it when you like it, and disagree with it when you don't like it. Then you become inconsistent. So I hope that makes some sense. So that was, in a sense, the purpose of me putting that post up, to challenge our community to see past this person that a lot of you dislike, to see that the tactic, in my, at least in my opinion, was being used in a way that we wouldn't like if it was used against us. So it was, in my opinion, correct that we. And again, the post said, if you're okay with the smear campaign, that's it was the campaign that was the issue, not so much whether you liked her or disliked her. And then one friend sent me, which now I want to take this video further. One friend on the post sent me her opening statements to that congressional hearing which was not related to her, the smear campaign about her Hitler statements. And in the opening statement, I watched her, kind of in a sense give her background, and she said she had been, I guess, the victim of a hate crime, and so she gave basically the standard talking point papers, as I call them, for, in a sense, why she believes the way that she does, and she put all these stats out in reference to what's happening in our community. And so it was two things I found funny, and I wanted to point them out on this video. So she had a grandfather behind her who basically, I guess, I assume, raised her based on the way she explained the scenario. So in the video, she says, I was raised by this man behind me, and she talked about, he was a very, much older man, and he was a sharecropper. So she talked about, in a sense, his difficult life, and said that's who raised her. And in raising her, she says to the committee, she was like, probably shocking to those people in this room, never once did he tell me I would be held back because of the color of my skin. He taught me the value of hard work. And so that was funny as hell to me, because she was saying, to the shock of everybody in this room, never once did he say that to me. And I'm laughing to myself saying, well, to the shock of you, there's no black parent saying that shit. Like if you think, because she thinks that her grandfather instilled in her these values and suggested she could be whatever she wanted to be, and that's the value he was raised with, to almost insinuate, because she said it was to a shock to this committee. The way she said it was hilarious to me, and it always trips me out how, when I have dialogue with even my friends at MentalDialogue who think as a Candace Owens doing, as if you just now tuning in, if you know me very well, I welcome people who think differently. So I personally don't have an issue with her like a lot of people in the community. But at the same time, we don't dialogue about what she had to say. And so in that situation where she says that it's shocking to the committee, I just find that quite laughable, because it reminded me that I've had, I guess, I'm a political independent, for whatever that's worth for this conversation, but it still reminded me of the conversations I've had with some of my friends who make the assumption that, since they, in a sense, stand on, I guess we'll call it the right for the sake of this conversation. I don't care which side you stand on, but that will say that to me as if parents are actually saying that to the children. All parents want the best for their children. And even if there are obstacles that they believe there are, what they don't do is convey it for their children, because they want it to be better for their children. So I found that quite laughable, that she thought it would be shocking to the committee. And I'm sitting here going, you don't even know your own community if you think other homes are saying the opposite. Like, what they confuse is when people are having political debates on ideologies, and someone's, I guess, arguing from the left, I guess they assume those people are going home and saying that to their kids. No, they're having an ideological battle with you as another adult who feels different. And that's they have their reasons for believing what they believe, and you have your reasons for believing what you believe. But just like you go home and tell your children they can be anything they want to be, if those people are doing it too. So not to belabor, I guess I belabored that point a little too long. The second thing that she ended up saying was, she gave out these stats. The stats, I think she said 74%. I haven't looked at them this year, so I don't know if the numbers ticked up another percentage, which was never good. But 74% of our children in the African American community are born out of wedlock. And that number's been 70% for at least maybe like the last 5 to 10 years. So it may be 74 at this point, to be specific. I'm just repeating what she said. She also pointed out that, I guess, I don't know if it was LA or California specific, if it was LA specifically or just California, but she also pointed out that 75% of the black males were not proficient in their reading grade level. And she pointed out a couple of other stats that said that, but she said there'll be no committee hearings on this. Matter of fact, let me give the context for those that don't know. I just saw this, but this was the committee was having a hearing on hate speech on the internet, and she was brought in, I guess, because she basically has built her platform via the internet, so she got brought in. Let me give that context as well. So she said there won't be any committee hearings on and she gave us several negative stats, and so she starts talking about white nationalism after the stats to say white nationalism didn't create those stats, and so obviously what is she doing? She's putting the onus on our community. What I find quite laughable is this concept when you talk about unemployment rates or you're talking about the schooling of these communities. And so those very people like herself who would make those statements, I see that they're also for school choice. I'm honestly, I see benefits of school choice and some disadvantages to school choice. So let me say, but again, because again, I'm going to make my point, but I do want to clear. I'm not personally decided on school choice or whatever. I definitely see some benefits to it and some disadvantages to it. But what I find laughable this post is called The New Racism. And let me say this real quick too. The new racism is to act like there is no racism. That is the new racism. And so the Candace Owens of the world, they will give these examples and say, hey, here's what we're doing. White nationalism is not doing those things. But somebody like herself, I haven't seen her specific take on this, but I would guess she's probably for school choice. I was thinking about this the other day, and this is partly why I did this post, just to share some of my random thoughts. So if you think about school choice and get into these political ideologies, well, school choice is really America saying, we know these schools in this area are fucked up. We know they're fucked up. So our best bet is to set up a school choice for the best students to get. Why wouldn't you want to get your best students out of this fucked up school? Well, why is the school messed up? Haha. There lies the historical, typically very typical, our so-called dropout factories. When you actually study the history on those schools, their demise didn't happen in the last 5 to 10 years. If you look and research historically, you will find that these dropout factories often have been in existence for the last 40 or 50 years, 60 years, when the New Deal is redlining communities. Like, people don't like to connect this. When you start going to the why, to the actual history, you want to talk about the results now, but never get into the why. But when you look at the New Deal, redlining people to certain communities, redlining to include the devaluing of homes, and when you understand the taxes that are taken from homes really predicates the foundation for the money that goes to the school in your community, in addition to people having higher incomes to where they can add to the PTA, which actually uplifts certain schools above others, because legally all children should get the even amount of tax dollars. But if you are in a community in which your homes have been depressed in value, then your tax dollars become limited, and the school gets known as, that school over there is not the most favorable one. And so it ends up happening for too many African Americans throughout the country, not all, but plenty of us grow up with the concept that we should get out of this neighborhood, especially our brightest, right? Our brightest are input told that you should get out of the neighborhood. I've been saying that for a lot of years because we know that this neighborhood doesn't have the best of schools. Just got into how that was set up with the redlining, right? This neighborhood doesn't have the best of school. And also, let's keep this in mind too, that if your zip code can determine that much of a factor for a group, then the zip code, meaning a zip code that's lacking jobs, partly why the redlining happens, right? Redline them to areas without job opportunity, and not likely to see the group elevate without an influx of jobs. So what you end up happening is a reality that the best and brightest, hopefully, quote unquote, escape those neighborhoods. That is a natural response. So now in 2019, what you will see as people, communities are saying, "Hey, let's look out for ourselves. Let's take care of our own communities." Killer Mike was the first person that made me think about the concept of these very same neighborhoods that were set up and have been devalued over all these years, and often now we start seeing them getting gentrified. Killer Mike was the first one who made me think of the concept that, well, now that these neighborhoods are cheaper, then our best and brightest who are pushed to leave, they should be in a financial position to go buy back the block. Like, that was the first person that exposed me to that thought, and I was like, yeah, justification could be a good word if we're doing it ourselves. I'm just kind of rambling in thought and just sharing a lot of my thoughts on this video, but saying that, and now we are encouraging people. We obviously, we lost Nipsey Hussle, who was pretty much showing the epitome of how to not leave the community but be a part of the community, and I hope, and he will inspire a lot of people to do the same thing. But I know a lot of times in these discussions in which people have said we should be doing that, the people say it negatively to others, to say, why do we always want to leave our own neighborhoods? Why didn't black people want to be around their own? Like we don't go back to the original setup of how these neighborhoods came about to have a level of understanding of why the concept was get an education, get a job, and escape the neighborhood. I'm saying that to empathize with how that, unfortunately, for a long time made sense if you were in a neighborhood that lacked job opportunity and the school system was obviously not that good. Relating it back to what I said originally, when relating this back to what Candace Owens, who's talking about white nationalism, didn't set up these stats. White nationalism definitely set up those neighborhoods. That, what else would you expect the results to be if you start out in a neighborhood as a group? Individuals can come over all kind of things, but as a group, if it starts out with a bad education throughout the district and limited jobs, it's no surprise that some of the very things that she's pointing out, to say, to as if she's saying we did it. Now, of course, this is going to sound like an excuse when it's just the reality of the why those neighborhoods look that way. In that sense, like, we'll see people take it as far as, even, unfortunately, the loss of a Nipsey Hussle. You know, it'll get said, why do we do that, when the reality is that those type of killings, which of course I'm absolutely disheartened. Gonna do another video with a brother by the name of Ricky Ross, hopefully this Sunday, talking about some of what I'm talking about now. But I'm just gonna mention this real quick. Again, obviously we are mourning the loss of that magnificent young man who was basically showing, especially the next generation, the way he was showing improvement even more than some of us talking heads, if you want to call it that. Well, but for example, I would assume a Candace Owens would say, you know, so even when he does right, look what our neighborhood. I see one of my other friends, just very upset with the quote unquote black community because of what happened to Nipsey. When the reality is, the results of those youth that get caught up in the streets to that degree, it's not an abnormal response to a desperate neighborhood. But even in a desperate neighborhood, very few of the neighborhood gets caught up in the streets to that degree. And this is not to make an excuse, but it is improper verbally to say, why do we do that, when those kids often who are getting caught up in that type of antics or that type of negativity. I don't mind calling it what it is, but often it's the generations before them that left them desolate to the degree that they would turn. Are some children turning to it? They don't have to. Yeah, but the most that get involved, in a sense, we left those babies out there and they turn to the street to where they will kill each other and be desolate to each other. And that's a something that I and others, we are getting involved in these children's lives to help them with that. But that's not a we thing, as if that's the majority of the community. Even in desolate communities, the majority of the community is not reduced to that type of action. The reality is, and I'm not gonna go too deep into that. I'm gonna say that for the live I'm gonna do with Ricky Ross on Sunday, to give a perspective on that. But again, go back to the earlier part of the video. It kind of meant you see what I was talking about with Candace Williams, but it just perplexes me that someone like a Candace Owens, not Williams, Candace Owens. Again, if you saw my post on Facebook, some people are just tuning in, so I want to just throw this back out there. I put up a post yesterday, kind of challenging our community to not allow her to be slandered in her statements, just because a lot of us, quote unquote, don't like her. I wanted to kind of have us challenge ourselves to remove ourselves from the emotion of who it is and understand that we need to be consistent in the tactic, that we don't want our name smeared through it with a falsehood. If you smear me with the truth, I may not like it, but at least it's the truth. But smearing even a Candace Owens and you being okay with it can come back to haunt you, because you have to be okay with it when it's done to you. So that was the reason I did that post yesterday for the people that's just tuning in. But I said I got exposed to her opening statements. Again, it's just because I see people tuning in now. I got exposed to her opening statements for that congressional hearing, and she was just talking about how white nationalism didn't create all these negative stats that she kind of enjoyed, in my opinion, pointing out about our community, as if to say, "Hey, what's up, Queen? How you doing, Tamika?" As if to say, this is our own doing. And the problem I have with America has always been the mistelling of the most recent history that we don't even tell. The most recent history, really from 1900 to 1950, that or even understanding how the New Deal worked. Like, 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 like here, like we pick and choose, but this is human nature. So I'm not knocking people by picking and choosing the part that fits their own narrative. That's human nature. We all can be guilty of it. I can be guilty of it. Um, for people who listen to Mental Dialogue or the talk show, quite often I'm so willing to bring both sides to the table. Like even me putting up that post, I got people insinuating that I'm, just me calling her or insinuating shows what side I'm on. For those who really know, I can be an enigma in the sense that I'm willing to see what both sides has to say. And let me give a reason for that as well before what's up, Big House? Let me give a reason for why I'm so willing for that. And then I'll break down again that lack of history that's missing quite often in how we look at things today. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Tamika said, "Yep, tell them that created a condition has rendered these results." Yeah, she said, "Yeah, plus our gangs were about protecting us." Yeah, another part of history that a lot of people don't know. So absolutely, Tamika. But let me tell you why I'm so willing to. I don't throw black people away. I know other people do. That's your right, I guess. I'm not a fan of it. I think we're too small of a community to throw each other away for having different ideologies, especially when it comes to politics and religion. At the end of the day, he said, Roy says, "Tell him, homie, we are the answer and we allowed the problem to grow, but she is wrong about the white nationalism and racism not being a real thing." Yeah, absolutely, Roy. Absolutely. I feel the same way. I'm just reading the comments and I'll get back to my thoughts. The Reformation of the South. Don't forget. Absolutely. I'm gonna get into that history real quick before I go go get off of this live. I'm just really random. These are a lot of random thoughts I have, and I'm just sharing them with y'all. So back to why I don't throw us away. And again, most people kind of like, most people will pick a side. And so for somebody like me, they'll throw me away because I'm so often seeming like I'm not picking a side. I'm unapologetically black. Don't care what you think. You can choose to throw me away because I'm so often willing to hear both sides of an issue. At the end of the in the end of the day, I find it to be a very dangerous world in which we all agree. That's a more dangerous world to me. And so I welcome our consenting thoughts to include our dissenting thoughts, I should say, for to a certain extent, even um, even if it includes someone I vehemently disagree with. I get it. I'm not when I say not throw them away. I'm not saying I'm necessarily all hanging with them and going to a drink with them, but I am not leaving the room. I'm not joining no campaign that because somebody that said something that's harmful, and I hate us calling each other coons. I don't mess with that at all. So if I could snap a finger and have us stop doing it, I would. Y'all have a right to do what you want to. So, but that's just my thought. But I don't waste time with that again because I don't throw us away. Here's why. And I thought about this thought today. Many times, the answer or the info that you might need is actually on the other side. So if you've thrown the other side away, whatever path you're pursuing personally or even as a group culturally, and for those who think that way, that dissenting thought, and even though you might disagree with most of what that person had to say, that dissenting thought may be the key to what you need to progress. And so the reason I'm not throwing anybody away and saying they own the team and off the team is because for me, I'm willing to dialogue with you for the time I need that information. If I've thrown you away, I can't get it. So if most of what you say I can't agree with, I ain't rocking with it. But I understand, and I get where this concept comes from because we definitely, to mention 50, 40 years ago, I get how often there's been movements that were sabotaged by our own. Matter of fact, Cristobal Morales says the best part of our history is how our own people sell us as slaves. I wouldn't call that the best part. That's not a word I would use. Um, Cristobal, but I do understand the concept. Let me see. I got another comment here. I'll come back to yours, Cristobal. Tamika says, yep, they hide it in places, areas you hate. Trust they do. Check their side and policies. You have to understand what you are combating. Why do you think they create spies? Yeah, all good thoughts. And, I don't know if I'm saying the opposite of what you're saying, Tamika, but here's another concept of quote unquote the other side. I don't look at it that way because I'm again, nobody has to look at it the way I do, but I want to at least explain the why. All I know is if there are policies being made that are not favorable to our community, because I'm about a black agenda, I know I don't want those policies made without any black faces in the room. I know that. And I understand that a lot of people will say, for people that, even are for Trump or on the Trump side, I know a lot of people will just automatically deem them as sellouts. But I'm an independent, again, just throwing it out for new people. But I tell my friends who are supporters of Trump that I'm glad they're in the room. I'm glad they're in the room. Doesn't mean I always agree with what they have to. Right, right. Exactly, Tamika. Yeah, it doesn't mean that I have to agree with what they say. Even for some of my friends who I'm questioning, why they're in the room. Like I'm not naive to why people feel the way they do. I'm not being naive about it, but I do know the last thing I want to happen, since everybody says nobody should be on that side, quote unquote. The last thing I would ever want to happen is to continue trying to navigate this American experience without anybody in the damn room. That's not an option. That's just strategically dumb to me. So I don't so what I don't want to happen, which happens too much in my opinion, but when we calling them coons and calling them sellouts, well shit, why wouldn't they be selfish? Why would they be advocates? And I can go into a whole nother Facebook post on how being committed to one party, either one, Republican or Democrat, is a fail for our community. Some people thought I've seen some of those videos. I'm not going to do it on this video. So like I said, I mentioned this in the very beginning. I'm definitely not throwing no one away based on your religious ideology or your political ideology. I need to go by how you treat me, period, point blank. That's how I'm going to figure it out. I'm not letting no group, conservative or liberal, tell me, who I'm supposed to be friends with. And, do I, Just as most people, in a sense, may dislike a Candace Owens, as I mentioned in this video. I was happy as hell when I saw her standing, a part of the pushing for the what's it called, the First Step Act, or whatever role she may have played. I got a couple friends here in Atlanta. Let me shout them out. Janelle Jones and hey, Shadon, I'll get back. Let me finish this live, and I'll get back with you in a second, Queen. Um, I'm not going to do too much longer. So Janelle Jones and Kevin King, they're putting together. I don't even know if they want this public. They're putting it out there, but they're bringing in the brother who's partly the author of the First Step Act. Like, that's so dope to me. They're conservatives. Those are some of the people I say I'm glad y'all in the room. You know what I mean? And so let me talk about this as a political strategy, and I'll make this the end of this live. So one thing that I try to tell people when it comes to politics is a self-interest business, and I do get concerned that as a community we misunderstand that. In my opinion, this is why we will be beholden to one or the other. Historically, we were Republicans, and then there's a period, if you study political history, when we switch, per se. Won't get into that history right now. But what I'll say is, I want people to think about this strategy from a political standpoint. So whether it's Obama in office or Trump in office, when it comes to an agenda, which we've done shows on Mental Dialogue talking about our agenda is not necessarily laid out clear. That's fair. That's a fair critique of our community. But let's say we have an agenda that is laid out for the sake of this thought about political strategy. So if I have 8 things that we have lined up for our community, right? Let's say we have 8 things that we're shooting for. Well, when it comes to this political game, whether it's Obama in office or Trump in office, my self-interest is to try to fight for those 8 things regardless of who the president is. And so the concept is, may have been, well, when Obama, there are people that say, well, we should have got all 8 things when he was the president, but we didn't, right? We'll say that. Well, what I see from a sentiment standpoint, as in a sense, kind of a groupthink standpoint, now that Trump, in my opinion, there's this assumption that he's not going to give us anything. And so to even go have the discussion, to even go in the room and fight for any of these 8 things on this agenda is useless. And so we'll demonize anyone that goes to have the discussion. And I'm saying politics is self-interest, and especially when it comes to local, I'm just using the presidential, which is the least of our worries. These are local concepts that we should be applying. Same concept. I'm just using presidents as an easy example. Well, at the end of the day, just like we were fighting for our 8 things when Obama was is the president, we should be fighting for those same things with Trump as your president. And so even if we assume he's not going to give us much, if he not give, but I'm just saying in fighting for it and dialogue and you give and take to get an interest. Well, if I'm going to get 2 of them, then I have to go in the room to get those 2. If there's people that look like us, bam, prison First Step Act. Not enough, but it's something. But so just rambling on with some of my thoughts, but again, challenging. I put the Candace Owens post up as a challenge to see us to look past whether we like the individual and be aware of the tactic. That in my opinion, we should be consistent in how we say, we don't want smear campaigns with false information. That should be something that we consistently against, whether it's towards us or against our quote unquote enemies. We should be consistent in that so that we can stand our ground when it happens to us. To me, that's something in caring for our community, in a sense, why I put that challenge up. But as far as some of her ideology, that white nationalism didn't create those things, the whole contraire, my friend, when you look at the history of this country, which we don't look at very well, and how some of these neighborhoods that we still complain about have been that way for 40, 50, 60 years and were set up intentionally and devalued, which leads to bad education, this concept of having to leave the community. I love the fact that our community is now saying, let's go back to our own communities. Let's not leave our neighborhoods. but unfortunately, and I'll leave it with this, shout out to a Nipsey Hussle, because now, there are people saying this is why we don't go back to our own neighborhood. So that's a sad concept that is realistic for people to think about after seeing the results of that. But at the end of the day, I think that brother will inspire more to be like himself and do what he did. And hopefully we in a sense weed out that small percentage of people that have took to the streets, and in the Chicagos and the Phillies, we will look down on them, or basically raise these babies up. Now it's not just a matter of looking down on kids who we didn't raise properly. Like, it ain't that simple. We got to take full responsibility, raise the village, step up, give these kids opportunities so that they're not choosing the streets over the opportunities that we provide. That's on us. So I'll leave it with that. Those are my thoughts on Candace Owens and the new racism. Didn't say a lot about the new racism, but that is to act like it doesn't exist. I know I'm not the first person to say that, but that's the new racism. Act like the systemic stuff does not exist. That's the issue. I don't give a shit about no individual hating me. That's no power. But if they got the power to do something about it, that's a bad paraphrase of a Stokely Carmichael quote. They got the power to lynch me, then I got a problem. Don't care if the person wants to lynch me. That's a paraphrase of Stokely Carmichael. I'm out. My name is Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. Check us out on Saturday with the Mental Dialogue talk show. We're doing our interracial children, black or white. We do the hard conversations on race and sex. Look forward to y'all tuning in. Blog Talk Radio, look up Mental Dialogue, or go to the Facebook page at Mental Dialogue, and the show will be playing there. Thank y'all for tuning in. Share this with plenty of people. I'm out. All I ask is that you think.